But
All
let's
right.
get started. I know it's going to be a small group. A lot of people they're getting ready for the holidays.
Mm-hmm.
So this
Okay.
after the last one we had on Mikal, I got so many comments from people.
Oh my
I got a
God.
ton of stuff from Cindy who missed it, so she had to recap her own.
Oh my gosh.
And
That was
then
good.
and then God led me to this one, and as I started to
Mm-hmm.
study it, I went, "Oh, this is a continuation." So
See.
we're gonna be going to Second Kings 5. And yes, we're looking at Naaman, but we're looking at really the servant girl.
Mhm.
So we're looking at how it all comes together. There's a whole lot in this chapter, and I want to talk about it all. Before I do, though, what jumps out personally to you? When you read this chapter, what stands out for you?
This little girl, she's so brave that
Mhm.
she she goes to talk to her boss and says, I'm observant, I've seen that our that our master is sick,
Mhm.
and this is where he should go. And she's also not afraid to disclose of her beliefs, her traditions,
Right?
and to cross boundaries, because she did really cross traditional boundaries by recommending that he goes to Samaria to
You
get
did.
help.
Right.
Um, so that.
Okay. Okay. Good. We're going to talk about her a bit. Cindy, what stands out for you?
And then how, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Cindy. The brain is braining. Um, the I it just stood out to me now that because I always wondered why does he curse him with leprosy? But it's almost like, to be fair, Naaman was healed from leprosy. So Elisha was staying in a fair land to go, hey, just because you cheated, the same thing he was suffering from, that's what's going to ail you. He didn't go outside of the box
Mm-hmm.
to curse him with something else. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Cindy.
Okay, let's see. The obvious thing is, for me, just is Naaman's pride. He's
Mm-hmm.
he wants the big guy to come out and make a big deal out of it. Instead, Elisha on purpose sends a messenger to give him the instructions, and he doesn't go for that. But it's interesting that there are two servants involved. First, like, the girl
Mm-hmm.
makes the recommendation. It could have cost her her life if it didn't turn out well.
Right.
Like, she could have been killed. I'm just thinking about that. You make a recommendation to somebody so lofty, and they could off with your head, so to speak. It didn't work out.
Mm-hmm.
But he's also given directions from Elisha by a servant.
Yes.
And then he goes off in a rage because he wants it his way. It doesn't come packaged the way he wants it.
Mm-hmm.
And more servants get involved. It's kind of interesting that the servants are the ones that are highlighted,
Mm-hmm.
like the house help. You know what I mean?
Right. Right.
They're not high up on the social totem pole. And they're the ones that are really moving this story along. And God
Mm-hmm.
is working through those that are of not much account, so to speak.
Right.
And then it's interesting that Gehazi, who is Naaman's servant, goes off the reservation and he decides he's just going to grab some of that booty for himself because it looks so good. So now we have a servant who is not working for the good of others.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of all I can come up with this at this point.
Okay. Yeah, this is good. There's lots of comparisons going on in this chapter, and I want us to look at them and then take it back somewhat to the discussion from 2 weeks ago. Because as I was studying this, I started to see some things. I'm going, oh, okay, God. I think where we started to get twisted in our topic of conversation. And I love Brenda said, we're projecting. And the conversation was getting heated and going and going. And Brenda's like, okay, we're projecting. And I think there's a lot of similarities in this. And I love this, Cindy, when you prayed, you actually, you prayed for what was going on in Gaza. You're praying about. I want us to think about, where does this young girl come from? Remember, just like with my call, we didn't have much to her story. But yet, when you reach back and you unfold it, you realize, oh, there's a lot to her. And it's the same with this little girl. Where does she come from?
She's a slave girl from Israel.
She's a slave girl from Israel.
From Samaria, though.
Right.
Samaria, because she
That's
knows.
the northern kingdom, right?
Yeah, the northern kingdom.
So that would be Israel, and the southern kingdom was Judah,
Right.
right? Okay.
Right. Brenda, why do you say from Samaria? Why do you point that out?
Because she actually knows the prophet there. She's like, there's a prophet in Samaria. She doesn't say go to the land where, she tells exactly this is where you need to go.
Right.
So which means that's where they took her from.
Right. Right. We don't know her age. Obviously, the scripture doesn't give it. So everybody just kind of guesses, she's obviously very young. How did she get taken? How did she end up where she ended up?
I think it's like they enslaved, like she was taken, probably abducted together with all the masses of the young women.
Yeah. Yes. It says that they raided
the bands.
Yeah, so raiding parties.
Yeah. Now, bands of raiders. Yeah. They had gone and they raided the land. So when Cindy prayed earlier and she was praying about what's going on over in, Gaza and all this, I think about, as I was reading this couple of weeks, it would be very similar. You look at the news and you see these kids just traumatized by what's happening, regardless of what we politically believe and feel. But you look at the faces of these kids being uprooted from whatever their home life is.
Yeah.
This is what this young lady is coming from. And we tend not to really think about her, how she got there. We just think about the fact that she is there, and yes, she's brave. But I want to compare her somewhat to McCall. Because why was it so hard for us to wrap ourselves around what was happening with her? As far as
Because there was a lot of unfairness. Like she was treated exceedingly poorly. She was always like the pawn that they used to get ahead.
yes, when we are up against something that is unfair in our own lives, how do we respond? How do you respond to unfairness in your life?
Usually, if you sit in my brain, it's not pretty, because I want elimination of whoever is bringing me the unfairness. And I have elaborate ways that I would like the elimination to happen. So that's usually where I'm sitting when I'm faced with unfairness.
Yes. Yes. Cindy, how do you respond to unfairness? We've all had to deal with some things in our lives that has simply been unfair. How do you deal with it? Thank you, Brenda, for that honesty.
I have to probably agree with Brenda that I'm somewhat similar. And I want justice to happen. And I get very angry when I do not see justice happening.
Yes.
It's one-sided, and there are more powerful people, even religious people, calling the shots. And more or less, I would say trampling, or, the grassroots doesn't matter. Not on the business goals, so to speak.
Right.
And I get very upset. I get, and upset is probably a very soft word.
Yes.
Irate.
Yes.
I have to do a lot of praying to calm down, and I'll express my my opinions, but
Right.
I get very angry about it
Yeah.
because I know what it's like to be kind of like on that other end. So it what it does is it sort of forms a trigger for any abuse or trauma that's happened in my own life
Right.
Mm,
and relate to it of
Yeah.
being powerless.
Right.
mhm,
Power.
Very
I love that word. I love that word. Yeah, I think that's true really of all of us. I think that's how we're all built. And depending on what it triggers, like Cindy is saying, and you begin to feel powerless, you
mhm,
even fight against it even stronger, you know. But we're looking at how it showed itself with Mikal, and she went from love to
mhm,
despise. And
mhm,
that was a very serious word that God chose to use, from love to despise. And it was because of all the unfairness that we saw that took place in her life. But I want us to juxtapose that against this young girl.
mhm,
Here she is at whatever age, let's just put her at, I don't know, 10, 12, just for
mhm,
the sake of an age, uprooted from home, raided. So that means there's all sorts of violence of some sort going on around her.
mhm.
She's coming to a foreign land. You
Yeah.
know, I don't know these people. These people don't know me. I don't know if the language was the same or not. I don't know. But she has witnessed some kind of violence, probably against her own family. You know, again, I love being able to recall the images that I've seen on the news because it
Mhm,
gives me a visual of what her life in that moment might have been.
mhm,
And then she's brought to the home of
mhm,
someone with leprosy.
mhm.
What does she know about leprosy from the country, from where she's from? What
The
was,
ostracized. Yeah, it's actually interesting that she's living in a house with somebody in power and has leprosy. So she can't even extricate herself from the situation because in Jewish culture, she could have extricated herself and like, we're not dealing with that uncleanliness.
right?
Oh, he
Well,
would have been inside the camp, yeah, for sure. But you know what's interesting? She
mhm,
could have been vindictive. These were her enemies that she'd been taking care of,
exactly.
and she tries to help him.
Yes,
That, wow.
yes.
She
That's
That's
should.
the contrast to Michal.
That's the contrast I want us to see. And I believe what God was, the reason he kept putting this on my heart. I understand unrighteousness and injustice and unfairness and all of those things. But I know as we ended it a couple of weeks ago, it is a matter of us cleaning out our hearts. What
Mhm,
she didn't do was clean out her heart. And
mhm,
somehow this young girl
Yeah.
figured out something, because we don't see exactly what Cindy was saying. I would be out for revenge. You know, I'm going, okay, I don't know you. You don't know me. You're sick. This is my opportunity. I'm not helping you. I mean, she could have
mhm.
been very
Mhm.
vindictive.
Yeah, she wasn't. I mean, yeah, she's
But
trying.
could that also be because she's young? She's still young, so she's still not much. Like I mean, I'm projecting, but I'm supposing not much has happened to her because you look at poor Mikhail. Like my gosh, so much happened that life did her wrong. So I can see how her heart just got so much embittered
Right?
You
in
know
that.
what?
But
Mikhail did not do what Hannah did. I was looking back and I thought about Hannah.
Mhm.
mm,
Went to
uh,
the Lord. Michal, we don't hear anything about her maybe trying to get God into
mhm,
predicament,
yeah,
okay? So
yeah,
Hannah had the same kind of like, well, not the same exactly, but she was suffering abuse.
right.
And so for whatever reason, Michal isn't told, we aren't told, maybe something happened, but that we don't know about, but she is not known for dealing with it by going to God.
Mhm,
Contrast, I thinking with Hannah, and maybe the young servant girl, she is very, very young. Hey, out of the mouths of babes, right? We love
mhm,
it, right?
yeah.
But um she also may have been trying to curry favor with her captors.
Yes. And
But it was
also,
walking a razor thin line, because if it didn't pan out,
yeah,
could be bad for her.
she's really shrewd, because she reminds me of Esther, like understanding the situation and working with what you have.
Oh, yeah,
And
that's
yeah,
good.
but then also it seems like this girl knows about Elisha. So it
Right.
sounds like she was raised in a very traditional, like a home that actually taught her about the prophets. Because she's a girl, she shouldn't be knowing about Elisha, but she does. So somewhere her parents, maybe they were neighbors, I don't know, but she knew about the powers of
Right.
this prophet.
She knew about it. She'd obviously heard about it. She had
Mhm.
either witnessed it, heard about it, something, but she believed
Mhm.
whatever it was that she heard
Mhm.
and or saw. But at the same time, I don't want us to dismiss the fact that she's young and dismiss, well,
Right.
it hadn't taken root. And the reason I say that, think about something that still haunts you today
Mhm.
that happened to you when you were 10, 12, or 14. It's still very much alive and well,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah,
So
Yeah.
right.
just because she was young doesn't mean she was able to, whew, okay, was
Mhm.
raided, I was taken away from my parents, and life was really ugly for a moment, and everything's okay. That still is in there unless she figures out a way
Mhm.
to rise above it.
Yeah.
Whatever it is that we've gone through when we were 10, when we were 16, all those things all those traumas that still trigger us today, it's because we haven't figured out how to deal with that.
Mhm.
Somewhere along the way, she figured out how to deal with the trauma. And I think it ties into, Brenda, what you're saying. She knew it, like she knew the prophet. She had seen the workings, or she had heard about it. And therefore, if it can be done for them, it can be done for me. She connected the dots.
Yeah.
And I think often it's hard for us, no matter what our ages are, to connect the dots. If someone did us wrong when we were 20, and now I'm 60, and I'm still angry
Mhm.
about what was done wrong, that's what helped, unfortunately, McCall go to
Mhm.
despise
Right,
Mhm.
exactly.
instead of love. We all start, I think, at that love spot, which is where she started, but despise
Mhm.
started to develop, and
Uh-huh.
it grew and it grew and it became deeper, and all of a sudden the love disappeared. And I think this
Yeah.
is a call for us. Again, God is calling us to deal with what's inside of our hearts. That's what we ended on with the last study. And I think what we're going to see, and the reason I want us to read the whole thing
Mhm.
is because we see it with the girl. We
Yeah.
don't have the details of how she did it, but she must have, because of how she is responding. She's
Mhm.
still walking in love instead of walking in despise.
Mhm.
But then we look at Naaman, and I think somebody mentioned his heart, the pride or something of his heart. What do we see in his heart?
Money. I see
Yes.
money. He is very opportunistic.
Yeah. Yes.
Yes.
He looked at an angle and he said, "Yeah, I got this one." He looked at that, how he could make money or benefit himself from the situation. It reminds me of the guy in Acts who asked the prophets if he could have that
The
gift of
sorcerer, Simon the sorcerer.
Simon the sorcerer.
Mhm.
Yes, exactly. And he really got pulled up short for that. So he's
It's
opportunistic.
yeah. It's interesting
He's
that
selfish.
he he has a seriously great relationship with the king, in that he has he has leprosy and he still can approach the king. And like there's that where you go, wow, he's really highly favored by the king.
Mm-hmm.
And also that the king values him enough to send him to another king. Well, the
Right.
king doesn't get the story straight. He should have sent him to Elisha, but he sends him to another king because he wants Naaman's life to be saved. He wants his right hand man to come back healthy and
Mm-hmm.
continue to serve him.
Mm-hmm.
So that relationship, so in that, together with that, he has so much power that the power has gotten to him that he thinks everyone now needs to just come out and actually, I'm sure he would have loved for Elisha to kowtow and then tell him this is what you need to do, because he was just so affronted that the guy
Right.
didn't even look at him, but yet also he's desperate enough that he will listen to the instruction of a servant girl to
Yes.
go to another land
Yes.
and get help.
Okay. Cindy, something hit you when Brenda was talking. If you can remember it.
Yeah, I do that. Ozzy had a close relationship with Elisha.
Mhm.
Elisha would not have had him as his servant if they didn't have some good relationship and he wasn't on the bandwagon. In other words, if he was with him, he saw everything he was doing, but he lacked faith. It didn't rub off on him. Contrast that with the servant girl. She could have had a longer distance relationship with Elisha, but respected the power of God and faith. She had faith. So she's over here.
Mm-hmm.
Ozzy's right next to him.
Mm-hmm.
And he turns around and says, yeah, I think I can get some. Oh, and I think I can lie to this guy. That just cracks me up. Like, really? Did you
Yeah.
not see what was going on?
Right.
It's like familiarity, right? Familiarity
Yes.
breeds
Breeds
contempt.
contempt.
He
Mhm.
started he's like, are you serious? This man has brought all the wealth. Like, also, that's the other part. When you see all the wealth, oh,
Mhm.
you better be giving me a bribe because I've seen everything.
Right.
So why are we taking it back?
Right.
Elisha doesn't want any payment for it.
Yeah.
So he's not, in that culture, you would be beholden and there would be strings.
Mm-hmm.
You accepted something.
Yeah.
At least that's how I think I've heard in the past, but
Right.
Elisha doesn't want God's work to be tied to some kind of income stream.
Mm-hmm.
He has a completely different business model in mind.
Mm-hmm.
And his relationship with Elisha did not rub off on him, but it did on the servant girl, which is interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it comes down to integrity of faith.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have an integrity with your faith? This girl's faith was just pure and just however she got there is miraculous,
Mm-hmm.
but it was just, I believe it. And if you can get to the man of God, he can do this,
Mm-hmm.
and she wanted what was best
Mm-hmm.
for her
Hard-hearted.
master,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you see something in her. And as we see it, I think Cindy, somebody pointed it out, this whole chapter is about servants
Mm-hmm.
and masters.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
God he interchanges, which one it has the greatest power. We think about masters and we think, well, the one who has the most. If you look at Naaman and the servant girl, they're polar opposites. He was a great man. She was really nobody. He was, he had great wealth. She had nothing. So you can see all that. But when you look at it spiritually, it's just
Ooh.
like he does this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Upside down.
Yeah.
Yeah. The first will be last and
The
the
first
last.
will be,
Yeah.
yes. And basically, what it's all coming down to is what's the integrity of your faith?
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't matter how much you have, doesn't matter what your position is, none of that matters if your faith isn't solid and real and can help you deal with whatever it is we're dealing with. Her faith at the age of whatever it was able to help her deal with what had happened in her life. And sometimes I question, do we have a faith that can help us deal with the things that goes on? Or, and I think we mentioned it once before, do we have a faith that's simply transactional? Which means at times, maybe you have enough money in your account or enough faith, quote unquote, in your account to cover it. But then there are times, oh, I'm at a deficit here. I don't have enough faith to cover what I'm going through. And then that opens up that window for despise to come creeping in. Michal didn't have the faith in her account to take her through all of what happened to her. So she kept withdrawing and she depleted the account to a place in which she had nothing else to give. So that when she looked at David, she was done. And God is saying, I don't want you guys to reach a point in which you're done. If we are withdrawing from that reservoir and we're never putting back in, then you will reach a point you have nothing to draw from. And we look at her, we look at, I was looking at the correlation actually between Naaman and David in the other story. Because we talked about David did some horrible things to Michal. You know, we're like, what'd you do to her? What do you mean you didn't come back? What did you know? And then it was hard to say, well, he's a man after God's own heart. You're like, why?
Why? Yeah. He said, I want her back because I paid for her. Really?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
So
I really love you.
Yeah.
it's hard to reconcile it, right? But what we landed on, the reason he's a man after God's own heart isn't because of how great and straight and narrow he was, but because every time God pointed it out, he responded. And if we look at Naaman, what did he do? She gave him direction. He went, then he got cocky and full of himself, and I ain't gonna do that. And then somebody come at him again, and he went, and then he gets cocky, but he kept responding.
So he humbled out.
He humbled out. It isn't about us being perfect and right all the time. It's about our willingness to be obedient and humble out. When I'm wrong, am I willing to say I'm wrong? Am I willing to listen to someone way underneath me? Because really, everyone he listened to, they were servants. That says something about him. And maybe it was the leprosy that put him in that mindset. Why do you think I would say maybe it was the leprosy that put him in that mindset?
Yeah, I mean,
Because it wasn't solvable. I mean, he had resources at his disposal, wealth, no matter what. But, against a pathogen, he had nothing. And it was going to kill him, and he knew it.
Yes. How does God do the same thing in our lives? He put things in our lives that is completely out of our reach and out of our control. Have you ever had it?
yeah. Oh my God. Yeah.
And what does it make us do? When you have something is completely out of your reach, it's completely out of your control.
Well, first, like, okay, really? Why is this happening? Okay, why is this so? Okay, really is like, okay, I'm trying to understand. Then I start to understand, and then I'm really mad that this is happening. Then I'm, oh, it's still going? Oh, come on. So then I live in an indifferent world where I'm going, okay, God, when you want to bless me, you will, because you bless, you know. So yeah, so that's where I get it.
That's how you
And
respond.
so yeah,
Okay.
because the faith was at the beginning, and now it's like, wow, we're in it for the long haul.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Okay, you bless me when you do. I'm just gonna walk. I'm just gonna do whatever. I might pray about it, but I mean, you've set a time for when you answer it, so I think I'll just wait.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Cindy, when something's completely out of your control.
You got to know that I just pray about it immediately as much as possible, because I know that I do not have the firepower. Going back to the fig tree and the mountain from
Mm-hmm.
that, have faith in God. It's not my faith or my amount of faith. It's my humility. I think just kind of going after what you're saying is to know where I put my faith. Because you had said, and I wrote this down, God knows how feeble you are. And I know what you can and cannot do.
Mhm.
So am I up to moving a mountain? Oh, no, not at all. So
Mhm.
I must put my faith in God, because he
Right.
says, well, moving mountains, seeing as I created them, I think just so you know.
Right.
I'm making it funny, but I mean,
Yeah.
that's his department.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
I have to be humble enough to wait. You know, I've had these chronic health issues
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
for such a long time. And when I was at PT today, the
Mhm.
receptionist says, I can't eat. This is what I'm going through. And I looked at her and I said, all of a sudden, the list went down through my head.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
want us to see God gave mountains. Thank you for using that
Mhm.
analogy. Each one of these characters had mountains in
Mhm.
their lives, because mountains are there to humble us out.
Mhm.
Whatever the mountain was that this little girl had to overcome,
Mhm.
she did.
Yeah.
And when she came into the home of this guy with leprosy, just like Cindy is saying, she came upon this woman who had some things that were bigger or
Mhm.
greater, and all of a sudden her list went down.
Mm.
So this little girl could have come into the house full of rage and anger and all sorts of other things, but once she got into that house, it's
Mhm.
possible she realized, oh, but I'm not living with leprosy.
Mhm.
God
Mhm.
gives us things because he's changing our perspective.
Mm.
And then you have Naaman, who goes to the Jordan River, and he gets an attitude. I mean, he's like, I'm not gonna, I could just wash here. He has an attitude. But along the way, that list starts to go down,
Mhm.
because he realizes the way that I'm going about this, it ain't working. And now we look at Gehazi. So you look at the three characters in this
Uh,
chapter. Yes,
just
Brenda?
one more. It seems like the servant girl being in Naaman's house actually was treated well, because she's able to approach the wife, right? I'm thinking she must have been treated well. Like, she's overcome her trauma, but she's also in a safe space where she's able to approach her master and be listened to. I don't know. Anyways, that's a diversion.
No, no, no. That's a good diversion, though. She had built whatever has transpired. Again, we don't know how long she's been underneath them.
Mhm.
We don't know any of this. The scripture doesn't reveal that. All we know is she did come from some trauma, just because we know that she was taken. So,
Mhm.
anyone coming from trauma, you've got to have something that you've got to work through.
Mhm.
She managed to do so.
Yeah.
And however long she was in this house, they were able to work it out together. And I think
Mhm.
it's because they were both, or all of them, were hurting over something.
Hmm.
You look at what she was hurting over, you look at Naaman, what he was hurting over.
Mhm.
I'm sure the wife was, I don't know what else to do. Everyone in the story needed each other.
Yeah.
But I think God is showing us something. We're all hurting. We got
Yes.
3 very different women on this screen tonight. We're all coming from very different things. We can
Mhm.
all pinpoint something when we were young and
Yeah.
even today that has happened to us that has hurt us. But
Yeah.
when we all come together, it's almost like the balm from Gilead that
Mhm.
soothes our soul. It's not like I can take away the pain that Brenda might have experienced or all the chronic fatigue pain that Cindy's.
Mhm.
I can't take any of that away. But something about God bringing us all together,
Yeah.
we're in communion, we're in fellowship with one another, and therefore we hold each other up.
Mhm.
They were able in this household to build something that worked for them.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just the 3 of them, because, like Cindy pointed out, the other servants
Mhm.
were also in on this.
Yeah. And the king.
And the king. It's like there was something going on here. And
Mhm.
were these God's people or not God's people?
Well, they say God blessed Syria because of Naaman before he even goes to Samaria. So,
Yes. So,
there's something there, and I don't, because it specifically says, and the Lord blessed Syria because of Naaman.
because of Naaman. Right. And that's why I said you look at the correlation between he and David. There's so many little pieces.
Yeah.
For some reason, this man had God's heart.
Mm-hmm.
David was a man after God's own heart. Not
Yeah.
again, not because David was perfect.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Naaman, for whatever reason, captured God's heart.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And we see that everybody underneath him was blessed because of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like Hagar in,
Mm-hmm.
you know, as long as she stayed in the household of Abraham, she
Mm-hmm.
also was blessed. So there was a blessing on his house, and we see it in the working of the servants. We see it in the workings of the wife and how they all
Mm-hmm.
interacted together. And then
Mm-hmm.
in comes Gehazi, slightly different. What do we
Mm-hmm.
see with him?
There's something about when you are with somebody for so long,
Sorry.
you can either be on the other way where you're always very respectful and very appreciative, and you still live in humility even in their company. Like, you understand that you're blessed because they're in your life, right?
Mhm,
And
mhm.
then you can be on the other side where you feel like, oh, I can get that, but you forget that, yeah, you can get that because of proximity
Yes,
to the blessed, And so I
yes,
think Gehazi forgot that he had the life he had because God blessed Elisha, and Elisha blessed Gehazi.
yes, yes.
He's in the people of God because he's a Jew. Naaman's not in the people of God. He's not a Jew. And back then it was like clear cut.
Right.
Mhm.
Interesting because Gehazi is not behaving or has the heart of what God is after. Whereas
Mhm.
just like Jonah,
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
and they repent. They're not in the people of God and they were his enemies.
Mhm.
They do the right thing. So then you have Naaman and the people surrounding him and his household, and they want they want to do the right thing. They're seeking the good of another.
Yes.
Mm.
Yeah.
Gehazi is seeking the good of himself.
He was seeking the good of
Mhm.
himself, and God
Yeah.
will not be mocked. You
Mhm.
know, so here I look at Gehazi and I look at church. If we think
Mm.
church, just because I go doesn't mean I'm in the presence of God.
Mm,
Just because I sit and listen to a preacher preach doesn't mean that it's actually touching my heart.
mm,
Here you have Gehazi, who is with the man of God, the prophet,
yeah.
but it did not just rub off because he was there. And that's what we're seeing. He did not have that integrity of faith that I
Mm,
mentioned early on.
So proximity has nothing to do with it.
Proximity has
yeah.
nothing to do with it. But unfortunately, so much of how we live life today is, as long as I'm in the proximity of something or
Mhm,
someone,
mhm,
all of a sudden that makes me that's why everybody wants to be around a basketball player or around a movie star. I'm going, it
Give
doesn't
you
mean
more
anything.
life.
Doesn't mean anything. But yet
Mhm,
in our messed up minds, it does.
mhm,
It makes me somebody if you're somebody.
yeah.
And it's just it's quite a startling contrast, excuse me, when we look at Gehazi at the end and we look at Naaman in his household
Mhm,
in that
mhm,
beginning.
Mhm.
And as Cindy was pointing out, as we're all pointing out, you have those that quote unquote God's people and those who are not. But I think God is showing us, you're all my people
mhm, mhm,
Mhm. Yeah,
if you're responding to me.
yeah.
right.
Being God's people is not a matter of being a Jew or not being a Jew. It's not a matter of being a disciple and not being a disciple,
Mhm,
of going to church or not going to church. We want to make it that
mhm,
Mhm.
because it makes us feel better being in proximity.
mhm, mhm,
You know, we
Uh-huh.
all know people who carry the title of disciple and they
yeah.
are so not a disciple.
Mhm,
We all know people who have gone to church all their lives and sing in the choir forever and ever, but they're far from God.
mhm,
Proximity itself is not enough.
mhm,
Are we really in integrity of faith with God? Or are we simply going through the motion? He will bless whom he wants to bless. And as long
mhm,
as we stand in that presence and let it truly penetrate us, then we all are blessed by it. But the minute you step out from underneath it, Hagar,
mhm,
Michal, as messed up as David was, she stepped out from underneath the blessing
mhm,
and she went from love to despise. This young girl could be the very same. She could go from love, I love my family, I
mhm,
loved my country, I
mhm,
loved my heritage, to being in someone else's home and despising it. But we
mhm,
don't get any of that.
Right. Yeah.
Naaman could have gone from, he loved being who's who. He was Mr.
mhm,
Everything,
mhm,
you know, but then he had to go and do what everyone else had to do and dump himself in this river that he didn't even think was worthy. He could have gone from love to despise, but he didn't.
Mhm.
I love when he talks about having to go back and he says to Elijah, I
mhm.
have to go back and this guy's gonna have to lean on my arm, he's gonna have to bow down. And he's saying, is that okay? Because I have to do this,
Because
right?
he's the one who sent me here to get healed, by the way.
Yes, yes. And what does Elijah tell him?
Go in peace,
Go in
right?
peace.
Pretty much.
Go in peace. When I read that, I thought about I'm sorry, this is an aside. I thought about how often we used to, and I'm sure people still do it today. We used to try to get people not to leave. Don't move.
Don't move. You can't move.
Don't move because,
I have
you
so
know,
much trauma
It's
from
really
that.
bad.
It's just not, yeah.
Yes.
it's trauma, right?
Yes. Oh my gosh.
But yet you look at, because that's basically what he's saying to him. He's saying, Elisha, I have to go. This is part of my job.
Yeah.
Yes.
Have to go because he's going to be leaning on me. So when he goes to bow down, I have to bow down. And he's
Yeah.
saying, is that okay? And Elijah tells him, go in peace. Whoa.
Great. I never thought of that. Do you know, oh my goodness, for us to be able to move from Boston, it took heaven and earth.
When I
word.
read this and God revealed this, I thought about how many people have we
Yes,
damaged because
yes.
we could not, because we didn't have integrity of faith.
Yeah.
We did not and could not say, go in peace.
Yeah.
Right. I hope and pray we're not still doing that. I'm sure we are. I'm speaking we general,
Mhm. Mhm.
you know, but I would look at this, it goes back to have faith in me.
Yes.
We looked at that before. We're putting our faith in situations, we're putting our faith in people, but have faith in me. This
Yeah.
young girl who had heard about and seen had faith in God, so that when her life turned upside down and it was scary and it was all these crazy things, she had faith in God,
Mhm.
or Elijah, the prophet of God.
Mhm.
And that allowed her to go through it in peace
Mhm.
Oh,
Preach the gospel. She actually
and preach the gospel.
preached.
Right.
She shared her faith.
Yes. She shared her faith in the midst of hardship. She shared her faith afraid, like you had pointed
Mhm.
out. You know, even though they had a nice working relationship, it was still scary to go before her
Mhm.
pastor and say what she said.
Yeah.
But she found it because she had faith in the prophet. She had a faith in the right thing. And I
Mhm.
wonder at times, do we have faith in all the wrong things?
mm,
And therefore, it cannot sustain us. It doesn't allow us to share our faith in scary places because our faith is in the wrong thing.
mm,
And then when we're off, are we humble enough, in Naaman's case, to go back to the servant,
Mm.
and
Mhm.
listen
Mhm.
and realize what I have before me, I can't heal. So I need to
Mhm.
listen to someone else,
Mhm. Mhm.
Or are we the Gehazis in this chapter? I know the man of God. I'm close to the pastor. We
Right.
like to be, I'm a Bible talk leader. It's like we get caught up in all
Mhm.
this craziness. But yeah, we see Gehazi's heart.
Mhm.
It's a matter of heart. It's all about what's in your heart. Gehazi, he first of all tried to deceive Elijah. He
Mhm.
goes to Naaman and says, this is what he said she wants. He lies. Then
yeah.
he goes back and he says he didn't get it at all. He didn't go. I mean, you can just see there was so much
Yeah.
inside of his heart.
Yeah. He
And
also wasn't satisfied. He didn't have a sense of satisfaction and contentment.
yeah, yeah, satisfaction and contentment. I think as we sum this whole thing up, in the place in which God has you in your life.
Mhm.
This little girl, for whatever reason, she was
Mhm.
satisfied and content. She found it.
Mhm. Mhm.
The other servants, satisfied and content. They
Yeah.
weren't jockeying to try to overtake Naaman.
Mhm.
You don't see any of that. People were content with where they were because they had a solid faith in God. God is with me.
And they believed in their purpose.
Right. And then you look at Gehazi and he wasn't satisfied.
Mhm.
He was cool being the number two man, but he said Elijah messed up. What did he say? I love how
He's so conniving.
yes. Yeah, he says, mine says, my master was too easy on Naaman
Mhm.
by not
Mhm.
accepting it. He was too easy.
Mhm. And he says, as the Lord lives, I will run and get something from him.
That was pretty arrogant. Oh my goodness. I'm surprised that he should have had on his rubber shoes.
Right? Exactly.
Lightning
Right?
comes down.
God didn't even strike him dead. Man, God is amazing. He's like,
But yeah,
sure, go run.
look at how we can
Uh-huh.
use God
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
mix and tangle it all up with all of our perversion. He
Mhm.
felt, I'm sure he felt this is okay to do.
Mhm.
Otherwise, he would not have set out to do it.
Yeah.
and throw God's name into it.
Yeah.
And I look at sometimes I go, and my husband and I, we laugh about this often. I go, this person has no fear of God.
Yeah,
Mm,
I mean,
kind of like,
things happen. I'm going, there's no fear of God here.
mm.
yeah, yeah, and you wonder how long, really? You haven't gotten the memo yet?
Yeah,
Yeah, and Gehazi really has his own self-deception has wrapped around his head, and now he's pulling God into his deception,
Yeah.
almost like a self justification, rationalizing it.
right.
Yeah.
Right. Which we all can do. And I do want to just sum
Yeah.
it up. I want us to always be aware
Mm-hmm.
there's a Gehazi in every one of us.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
We-
we like being close to the top people. We like, you know, we like what we like, and it's very easy to mix up God's will and our will. And
Mm-hmm.
at times, if we're not careful, we can deceive ourselves and think we're doing what God wants us to do. When in
Mm-hmm.
actuality, we're doing what we want to do, and we're just dragging God into it. And
Oh,
it's important that we look at that and go, God, show me the Gehazi in me.
Mm-hmm.
Help me to see it, because I don't want to end the way he ended. You
Yeah.
know, he
Yeah.
ended with leprosy, as you pointed out. God said, I will not be mocked.
Mm-hmm.
So don't play games with me. Don't pretend, you know, either you will live the way I'm calling you to live,
Yeah.
because I'm not going to switch over and do what it is you want me to do. Someone's got to be master.
Mm-hmm.
And Gehazi was being master in his life. He was just simply pulling God over into it. God is calling us to really make Jesus Lord of our lives. We saw it, we see it with the little girl, even though we don't see how she got there. We do
Yeah.
see it. And we see it with Naaman.
Mm-hmm.
Even though
mhm.
he had to go back at it a few different times, God doesn't care
Mm.
that it takes us a while to get it. He cares that we get it.
Yeah.
Kai
Oh,
talks a lot about practice.
Mm.
Practice your faith, practice. So
Mm.
we see Naaman practicing until he finally got it right. We don't see Gehazi practicing anything. We don't see him going after anything as far as connecting himself righteously with
Yeah.
God. So lessons throughout the whole thing is that we can all start out in love, but we can all end up in despise very easily
Mm.
if we allow
Mm.
ourselves to be deceived. It really is a matter of the heart. Are you checking constantly what's coming out of your heart? This has been a long, rough week for me at work and
Mm.
everything. And I had to go, whoo, okay, God, checking my heart here, checking my heart.
Mm.
The holidays are hard. Holidays are
Mm.
hard for my families, because this is where it's really highlighted that um, the lack in their lives
Yeah.
is
yeah.
really highlighted. And therefore, the mental health and the anger and all this stuff, it just starts just rolling out. And I understand it. And it's very easy to either go and get angry and frustrated with them,
Mm-hmm.
or to stand against it and try to help them to see God is still working in your life. It's
Mm-hmm.
not about your presence. It's not about this, you know, it's calming down. It's managing expectations.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Managing expectations. Because when you have the world, I know we started it tonight, kind of talking about it, when the world is talking about presents and Christmas trees, and you know, you got all this stuff coming at you, and you don't have any of that.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have, we had I digress here, but we had a Santa Claus come over to one of the elementary schools just to, you know, give the kids a little, everybody got a little toy.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but he didn't know. He said to the kids, you got to go home today and make sure you make your bed, because if you don't make your bed, Santa's not coming. You know, just trying to, and the kids were
Mm-hmm.
like, "Yeah." And there was one little one that was just standing and started to cry.
Uh,
You
And
have a
he said, He went up to him, and said, I don't have a bed.
Oh my gosh.
Oh,
Oh my gosh.
I don't have a bed. Now, the Santa obviously wasn't trying to make the kid
yeah,
feel
yeah.
that,
No.
but the reality is these kids, many of them don't have a bed. They don't have a room. So when they see all of what they see,
Yeah.
it makes them feel so small.
Oh yeah.
So we're in the process of trying to just push away the world
Yeah.
and lift up their spirit. So this is a hard, this week and a half is the hardest week and a half really of my year
Mm,
because of what I see in my kids.
mm.
But I don't know, tangent. That is a tangent, but
Wow.
pulls back into us in our
Yeah.
relationship with God. If we
Yeah.
can push out all of the excess, all of the garbage that comes flooding at us. It's the haves and the have-nots. And,
Yeah.
it'll always be there. But I look at this story, and this story is full of haves,
Yeah.
have-nots.
And have-nots. Yeah.
But the beauty is, it's the have-nots that are standing where God wants us to stand. We look at the servant girl.
Yeah.
We look at the servants. We
Mhm.
look at Naaman when he finally realizes all that he has means nothing. It's the
Mhm.
have-nots that God is blessing. It's Gehazi fighting for the haves
Mhm.
that gets him in trouble.
Yeah.
So if we can look at our own walk and go, God, help me to weed out what shouldn't be there. Help me to be okay with my place in life. If
Yeah.
I'm a servant, let me wear that title boldly. That's what
Mhm.
she did. She wore it boldly.
Yeah.
And that allowed her to make the difference that she made. Are we wearing our titles boldly? Or are we fighting to be something that we're not? Are we trying to manipulate and deceive our way into getting more like Gehazi? Because we will end up like he ended up. Everyone else in this story ended up beautifully, with the exception of that one. Don't be that one.
Mhm.
Amen. All right, guys. Yeah, I just think overall, God wants us to see that no matter what our conditions are in life,
Yeah.
it still comes down to a matter of our hearts.
Yeah.
This girl came from some harsh beginnings, but her heart
Mhm.
was clean and pure. And
Yeah.
then we see others in the Bible, much older, much more mature in life, whose hearts were full of junk. And
Mhm.
God is saying, it's not an excuse.
Mhm.
He didn't allow it to be an excuse. He still expected her to get her heart right. So no
Yeah.
matter what it is that we're fighting against, and it can and probably is unfair,
Yeah.
but God is saying, but we can't use it as an excuse. I expect
Mhm.
you to get your heart right.
Mhm.
Mhm.
All right. All right, y'all. That's all I got.